Good evening, students. Today we have discussed a little bit regarding post-structuralism. So, with a brief recalling of yesterday's few things that we have discussed to begin with the post-structuralism, I will begin today's class. So, yesterday we have seen the question of meaning. Okay. And therein we have some questions like, is meaning at our disposal? Do we have our own meanings? Okay. Uh, and the answers for these questions are, of course, no. As far as the traditional or the structuralist view of learning is concerned, or view of language is concerned, this is strictly no. The yesterday we have seen with the example of Alice and Humpty Dumpty how meanings are not at our disposal. So that's why Humpty Dumpty got a question from Alice. How can you say that glory is to get a great knockdown, etc.? And Alice's skepticism, as well as Humpty Dumpty's declaration that when he speaks something, he means what he wants to, the master of all. So that's what we have seen, yet we have understood that the meanings are not at our disposal. And of course, we cannot have our own meanings also. Why? Because we have seen yesterday that we invoke the meanings other people when the meanings of other people when learning our mother tongue. So language learning is a process which starts from our childhood, which we can't even recall in entirety, or totally we can't recall, because it starts at the earlier stage itself. So, but that will become possible when we are agreeing for some kind of a contract, as we have seen this in Saussure also, the object of study. And we have to invoke the meanings which are already existing. So this is what we have seen in the earlier discussion. And we have also seen that dialogue or communication is possible with the appropriate use of language. That what is appropriate use of language? That means when we live in a linguistic community, we have to use the language that is understood by the members of the community. By appropriateness, this is what we mean here. That is using the language as per the convention, because language is a conventional code that is of course developed by a social contract or whatever it is, by a group of people, which we can name as one linguistic community. So the dialogue between people, so the dialogue is actually the communication. The main purpose of language is communication. So besides other, let us not consider the other purposes now, but let us confine it to as for the linguistics, okay, or communication skills is the primary purpose of the language. So this is possible only when we are using it appropriately in accordance to the meanings that are adopted by a particular group of language. If not, the dialogue may not take place. That is very important. Now, actually, we have to see by this discussion of Humpty Dumpty, Alice, and this appropriate use of language, etc., we will come to the conclusion that language is not private. So language is not a private FIR otherwise, rather it is a social or public FIR. And this we have already seen in the Saussures, the object of study. So one more thing, what language enables us. So that we have seen, language enables us to acquire knowledge. So what knowledge? Of course, the knowledge of different branches of epistemology. No, the knowledge of whatever is there in the society, the knowledge of living, the knowledge of getting things done, okay, the knowledge of earning something, etc. So, later, actually, we give different names to all the branches of knowledge. The philosophy, economics, or psychology, or even literature. Yesterday, I took our own example, that is literature, and I have shown you that literature is having a language of its own. And to understand that, you should be very thorough with the literary terms. Okay, so like that, the one other use of the language is it enables us to acquire knowledge. And actually, a command of new knowledge, of course, amounts to the appropriate use of new vocabulary and syntax. New knowledge in the sense here, if you want to know or if you want to master economics, you should know all the economical terms like demand, supply, etc., which you might have read in your degrees, etc. And then if it is for psychology, you have to know conscious, unconscious mind, or ego, and so many other concepts that are related to psychology. So mastering of any knowledge, of course, accounts to the learning of a language only. That means to learn a language, you need vocabulary, and then you should know how to combine those words. In the similar manner, if any other subject, knowledge branch, of course, needs the same thing. You have to know the ABC of economics, or ABC of psychology, or the ABC of literature, or other political science, etc. And then only the ABC should be correlated, coordinated, etc. Then only you can master the subject. So this is knowledge, gaining knowledge. So gaining knowledge is possible only through language. And the examination that we take at the end of anything that we learn, now you are writing at the end of the semester, anything that is like a policing way of a profession. So the economists may have an exam, or teachers of literature may have an exam, or psychologists may have an exam. No, not only through while you are going through the studies, but when you go for jobs also, you have to go through the exams. That is, language enables you to procure to or acquire knowledge. And then besides knowledge, one more thing is, if not any particular kind of knowledge like say economics or psychology or philosophy, etc., language, of course, in its broad sense, is a source of social values. So it is a source of social values. By living in a group, of course, we will learn the group dynamics. What is the norm of that group? How should you behave in that group? How should you dress yourself? Or how should you talk? What should you eat? And how to perform some rituals like birth or death or some other things. Okay, so of course, language is behind all this. What we have is language only. Okay, so the language, of course, gives us the social values also. And now, after seeing the relation between language and knowledge, let us come to language and cultural change. So, language transmits the knowledge and values that constitutes a culture. Actually, when a group of people are living together and they are following some practices, some traditions, etc., all those practices, traditions, customs, etc. put together is what comes under culture. So what is your culture? Many a times you might have listened to this word. If you do something very something which is not in vogue, naturally your elders or people, your neighbors, etc. may say that this is not our culture. ఇది మన సాంప్రదాయంలో లేదు, like that they used to say. So naturally our values, our traditions, our customs, etc., of course they constitute the culture. So if you think that some values are there, okay, language is the thing that is transmitting the knowledge and values that constitute a culture. So because we are living in a culture, naturally some meanings are acquired from the culture. So we may think like this, that words and their meanings get locked in the culture. So like a structure, a structure also you can take here. Culture is also like structure, only a structure. Okay, culture has some beliefs, some practices, some traditions. So all put together it will become into a structure only. So in a particular culture, you are not supposed to do like this, you are supposed to do like this only, etc. So in a culture you may have so many values, practices, beliefs, okay, and traditions, etc. So naturally language is the thing that transmits all our values that constitute a culture, what we call as a culture. So because language, of course, I think Raymond Williams says language is culture. So okay, that is okay, language is culture, that is okay. So then we also have to agree that whatever meanings of the words that we are able to perceive are, of course, are the result of living in a culture. So what to do? Are we not supposed to change the meanings that are already established? So that we have to examine. Reproducing existing meanings exactly will only reaffirm the knowledge our culture takes for granted. So if you want to take reproduce the meanings that are already there, that means you are referring to the meaning that is referential. Okay, referential. Now relational, that is a separate concept of Saussure, but here we are talking about referring the signifier. Okay, the signified, the sign is equal to signifier, signified, etc. We also have a referential function to the language. So if we accept the meanings that are already existing in a culture, of course it is just accepting them. So the question comes, is do we have to only accept, and can't we just add any other thing to that? So in turn it means that meanings control us and inculcate obedience to the existing values. Most of the time when a value is existing, or when a value is established and people, of course, practice it for years together or centuries together, it becomes a value, a belief becomes a value. And then if that is not followed, or that meaning is not taken by you, it may be a rebellion. Okay, or it is like what you call, in a way, when we are accepting the meanings in a particular culture, of course we are being governed by the norms of that particular culture, and also we develop a kind of obedience to those existing values. That is how, social norms or social, what do you say, social principles or social practices, some practices, etc., of course, will attain their value at a given point of time, where of course no one may say no to that. Okay, so if you simply, here we are examining what is the relation between language and culture and cultural change. Language is culture, and is change acceptable in a particular language? How it will get established? That is what we have seen. Because as according to the point of view of the language, of course, we will come to know that already the cultural values are established by the language, and the meanings are already attributed. If you are not accepting the old attributed meanings, it accounts to a kind of cultural change. So it's a kind of cultural change only. So that is why, and if you keep on accepting the norms or principles or values in a culture and follow the meaning that is already prescribed in the culture, it amounts to stereotyping. Like I used to tell you, in while telling feminism, I told in our Telugu language, we have so many sayings or adages that are very stereotypical. Okay, that is gender biased or caste biased or reason biased, etc. will be there. So, for simply for gender biased, we can take we have a saying in our language like ఏడ్చే మగవాడిని ఎప్పుడు నమ్మకూడదు, నవ్వే ఆడదాన్ని ఎప్పుడు నమ్మకూడదు. This is a kind of what do you call, the stereotype. It refers to a stereotype. That means what? If a man is crying, he's a cheater. And then if women is laughing too much, of course she's not a stable, stubborn woman, but a fickle-minded woman, etc. Or maybe a cheater only. This has got established in our culture. And if you go on believing in this, naturally it amounts to stereotyping. Okay, so sometimes with the passage of time, we may come we may arrive at a point of time where we need to change this. And if you go to the actually feminism, okay, the feminists and the feminist movements, etc., actually has begun like this only. They wanted a change in the already established meanings, like a helpless little girl and aging Harridan. Okay, little girls are always treated helpless, and aging women are always treated as bossy, okay, angry women, tough women. So this kind of, and we have discussed in the previous semester how we have the stereotype of angel and monster. Okay, that is also a norm that is constructed. So feminists, of course, have raised their voices against this construction of women like angel and monster. Why? Either you, if you are good and listening to the words of all men or everybody, you are an angel. If you are questioning, then you become a monster. So where is the human element for women? So this is how women actually started questioning. That is, of course, they did not accept the meanings that are already established in a culture. They started questioning. And of course, it is not only feminists or etc. Even if you go to poets, our writers also, they introduce new words as they need for their poetry. And if you take science and technology, of course, it has proceeded with introducing new words into the vocabulary of science, and also different reformation movements or different theoretical movements, etc., will of course proceed with introducing new words into the language, which may not be existing at that point in the culture. Okay, so why I have given all this is actually post-structuralism is such a kind of theory which is actually began to um, you know um, reconstruct the meanings or deconstruct the meanings that are already existed. Okay, they are there. So the post the language, how language knowledge is connected, how language culture is connected, etc., we have definite views till now, and post structuralism started reviving those views, okay, or reforming or changing those views. So this post-structuralism and language. Now we come to the crux of the matter, that is post-structuralism and language. What is post-structuralism? Yesterday also I told you after structuralism. Of course, post-structuralism also to some extent based on the theories of Saussure only. But at one point they differed. Okay, structuralism, of course, by name as it is revealing, is focusing more on the structure, a permanent structure, whereas post-structuralists won't believe in it. For them, there is no permanent or authoritative structure. Okay, so let us come to from the beginnings. Let us see what is post-structuralism. It is a theory concerning the relationship between human beings, the world, and the practice of making and reproducing meanings. So what is post-structuralism? It is a theory which examines the relationship between human beings and the world. So till now we are having a kind of belief with, before post-structuralism came, we have modernism and then enlightenment period, where human-centric world, of course. Okay, and having what you call self. Single self, monotheism, like that, even God or human beings, etc. So post-structuralism is a kind of theory which began to question already established norms or traditions or practices or beliefs, okay, or which are treated as constructions only. They are the beliefs, of course, are not coming out or emerging from nowhere, but they are also man-made constructions only or cultural constructions only. So post-structuralism is a new way of looking during 1960s, a new way of looking at the things, and that is why it started studying and restudying or recapturing what is the relationship between human beings and the world. Okay, and the practice of making and reproducing meaning, how we reproduce meaning and how we make meanings. The practice is already existing. One practice is already existing, and now post-structuralism wants to re-examine this practice. And then, what is the genesis? Emerged in France during the 1960s. Actually, people consider that it is a reaction against many Eurocentric theories that are oppressing many other cultures, races, genders, etc. This we have seen in Bakhtin also, in Bakhtin's philosophy, not exactly the discourse in the novel, not that essay, but while I was introducing to you the overall philosophy of Bakhtin, I told you how Bakhtin is also trying to bring in the post-structuralist view of the world. So that Bakhtin has a synthesis of Marxism, structuralism, post-structuralism, of course, philosophy, theology, his own theology, etc. And that is why he was claimed as post-structuralist by post-structuralists, structuralist as structuralists, and theologist as by theologians, etc. So, like this, in France during 1960s, a kind of new literary theory has emerged, and then it was considered as an anti-discourse to Eurocentrism. See, Eurocentric, this word we have already discussed in the tradition and the individual talent in your third semester. So, Eurocentric means what? We examined that for Eliot, who speaks of a tradition in general, but gradually he moves into a tradition of the European tradition or English tradition, like that. So, not only Eliot, but many of the European nations have the opinion that their tradition is more valid and all others are not valid or not at all traditions. This is a devaluing of the other traditions. And with that view only, they have gone to the world and have destructed most of the cultures, traditions, religions, our societies, etc. That's a different story. You know that colonialism, imperialism, how they have captured the lands, not only lands, but they have captured the cultures also. Now we have what you call as linguistic imperialism, cultural imperialism. It is not only imperialism is not only a political imperialism. The after effects of imperialism have led to the examination of many theories. So, how Eurocentrism was acting as the center. And of course, it has created some kind of feeling that if you are European only, you are great, because they feel that their culture is superior, okay, and all others are inferior. So, very ironically, the deconstruction of the superiority of the Eurocentrism or European culture began in Europe only, that is in France in 1960s. And the key figures of this, people consider many, but the key figures are Derrida and Roland Barthes. And I think two essays are prescribed for your study. So we'll be coming to those analysis or to know more about Derrida or Barthes and their essays when we come to that particular topics. But now actually, it is believed that post-structuralism is having American roots, American new criticism roots. I've told you many times that new criticism is a way of criticism which focuses more on the text. Okay, text sans the author. That is what. Okay, in that particular to that extent only we can see the roots of new criticism in post-structuralism, and other things are not similar with new criticism and post-structuralism. So the new criticism actually is a school of criticism in America that of course it is dominated by American literary criticism during the 40s, 1940s, 50s and 60s, and there are many exponents of this school of criticism: William Emerson, William Wimsatt, okay, and then Bradley, etc. And they actually continued their criticism on the precept of intentional fallacy. Intentional fallacy is actually this term is to describe the problem inherent in trying to judge a work of art by assuming the intent or purpose of the artist who created it. So that is nothing, to put it in simple words, it is detaching the intention of the author from the text is intentional fallacy. We need not. New criticism says that one who is evaluating the text of literature need not go into the analysis of the author's intention. Previously, it was believed that the main purpose of reading a text is to arrive at the intention of the author. The main purpose of the text of literature is to arrive at the intention of the author. But new criticism, of course, has changed that. So this is also a kind of post-structuralism only. Okay, so that is what new criticism, and of course, detaching the author's intention and author from the text of literature or a piece of literature is what is taken from by the post-structuralist critics from new criticism. But in all other matters, new criticism is very different from the post-structuralism, because new criticism believes in authority, believes in structure, but post-structuralism do not believe in that. So the general, this is what actually the post-structuralism, a little bit of history and who are behind that, where can we trace the roots of post-structuralism, etc. And with this, let us see some general practices or general principles of post-structuralism. The main principle or practice of post-structuralism is to deny the single self as a singular coherent entity. Self is referring to human self. Okay, we always have the self identity, self respect, self confidence, like that. So self is more important, and previously self is considered as a single entity. Okay, a single entity, but post-structuralism is denying that, and it says that considering self as a single entity is fictional. It is erroneous. It is fictional also. Why? Because it believes that individuals always have conflicting tensions, compromises, conflicting tensions, etc. Okay, individuals compromise, conflicting, comprise, an individual according to post-structuralism comprise conflicting tensions and knowledge claims. Different personalities are there within the self is not a single entity. In the simple philosophical point of view of our own religion, even in Hindu religion also, you can say in our land what we believe is Atma Paramatma. Okay, and Atma means Atma, it belongs to Paramatma, and the body belongs to the earth. So like this, what we have two, we are not a single entity, we are two. That means the soul and the body. So this is like dualism only. This is not monism also. It is not monism, it is dualism. So the self, treating the self as a single entity is denied by post-structuralism. And of course, that is what we have in our culture also. We don't treat the human body as a single entity. We have the soul and body. The soul belonging to the heavenly divine things, and the body belonging to the earthly physical world. Okay, so physical, metaphysical also. Soul, body. So body is physical, soul is metaphysical, like that. So he says, besides that, they want to say that we have conflicting tensions like in gender, class, profession, etc. So of course, human being is not a single entity. He will be always operating between conflicting tensions between gender, class or profession, etc., etc. And then one more thing is, reader, according to post-structuralism, reads the text from his self-perception. So why this concept of self is important for post-structuralism is, it believes that, or post-structuralists believe that, a reader reads the text from his self-perception, how he is perceiving himself. He will be reading the text from that point of view. And the post-structuralists say that this plays a critical role in one's interpretation of meaning. And that is why if I interpret, I may get one meaning. If you interpret, you may get one meaning. Like your classmates, like say Srinivas or Sausanya or Chandu, etc. When you take a single text, you may get different interpretations. Why this happens? Because they say that our self intervenes with the interpretation of the particular text in our hands, and the self actually, different scholars of post-structuralism have viewed it differently. Like say the post-structuralist psychologist Lacan, he thinks that it is psychoanalytical. Psychoanalysis means mind. A text acquires the meaning depending upon the mind of the reader. And it is because he is a psychologist, he says that. And then Foucault. Michel Foucault is there. Foucault says that it is power on self. Power in the sense, power in the sense of, governments, okay, etc. And how it is regulating you, regulating your life, how the power in that manifests through some rules, regulations, etc., affects the man's thinking or behavior, etc. So for Foucault, it is power on self. So our self will be shaped by many different things. The psychologists say it is the mind. So from the very beginning of our life, from childhood itself, they will take. If we are having some certain phobias, the psychologists have a different interpretation, because from childhood you are facing such and such a situation, that is why you have developed this phobia, etc. And that is of course as mind perceives it. And for Foucault, it is the power politics. Okay, power, how your position is there in the society, etc. So depending upon that, actually you will understand that post-structuralists believe that an interpretation of the text is always affected by the self-perception of a reader. So that is why they give more importance to the self. And then the meaning intended by author is secondary. As I told you, it is the new critics quality. So as new critics intentional fallacy is there, here also in post-structuralism, we have for them the meaning intended by the author is secondary and the meaning intended by the reader is primary. So whatever the meaning perceived by the reader is primary. And it denies single meaning, single orientation, and single existence. So post-structuralism will never agree with single. See, in Eurocentrism, we have that single concept only. One culture, one superior culture. Okay, the culture is European culture. Language is English language. Religion is Christian religion. So, etc. So, they actually have started to spread their monoculturalism actually. So the now monoculturalism is, of course, has created havoc. Okay, that is a different topic we can't discuss now. But actually, that is why now the post-structuralists don't believe in the anything single, meaning, orientation, existence, and nothing is single for them. They deny. For even literature, for the text of literature, they say that there is not a single meaning. There is not a single orientation. There is no single existence, because the text again and again comes to the existence or comes to live whenever a reader takes up. So it believes that the meaning is not single, or the meaning is not what author intended. So if you confine the text to the intention of the author, we may say there is a death of the text. The text is closed. The text will not be a open discourse then. So it becomes a closed discourse. So there are no interpretations. No other interpretations are possible. That is why new critics have advocated for removing or taking the text away from the author. And of course, post-structuralists also believe in the similar idea. And then it aims to create a multifaceted interpretation of a text. So multiple interpretations are possible in text. In it, the reader replaces the author. It is called sometimes decentering or destabilizing. Author is considered as the center. Okay. This we will understand what is an author when we come to explain that essay. You will come to know how author became a center and how everything is revolving around him. And there, that is why it was felt that it should be deconstructed. So here, post-structuralism aims at replacing the author, which is sometimes called as decentralizing or destabilizing. Okay. Without a center fixation on the other, it examines other sources. So without fixing on one center, post-structuralism tries to examine on the other sources, reader, cultural norms, other literature, etc. But the difference between, you may ask me here, if you are following seriously, you will get a doubt. Is it not the new criticism also has advocated? Is not the same that the new criticism has advocated? That means removing the author and reading the text without the author, etc. And considering the cultural norms, historical or social, etc. Similar only, new criticism. That is why we have already seen that the roots are there for post-structuralism in the new criticism. Then what is the difference? The difference is new criticism considers that they are authoritative. See, culture or other social, historical, etc. They are authoritative. But post-structuralism thinks that they are never authoritative. For post-structuralism, the reader, culture, history, society are never authoritative and don't promise consistency. They are not having any consistency also, and there is the meaning is not going to end there also. That is also there. Okay. Then the next thing that post-structuralism actually focused upon is the deconstruction. This is the big word of deconstruction, that is by Derrida. What is deconstruction? It is, in simple terms, it is deconstructing the earlier constructions. See, structuralism has established binaries. Like you say, a binary is like male, female, culture, nature, okay? Nature, culture, etc. All these light, as I have already told you, master, slave, etc. These binaries, actually, they are constructions only, structures only. And structuralism believes that the world operates on binaries. And in the binaries, always what happens is the first one is validated. That means male, female. Male is validated. Light, dark. Light is good, dark is bad. Master, slave. Master is, of course, the authority, and slave is considered as not significant. And then nature, culture. Nature is more important, culture is not. So that comes out of that. Whether how far can we go on to say that the second term is not validated? So deconstruction is trying to break the binaries. So it is, and of course, in the binary, in the system of binary itself, there is a hierarchy. The hierarchy means first, second, male, female, dark, light, dark, master, slave. So the hierarchy is there. So the hierarchy means the master, male, light come and are on the upper levels, and the second ones are in the lower levels. This hierarchy is there, which leads to some authoritative states, etc. Also, this is a big discourse, but we can't go into that for right now. If time permits, we can discuss later. So, post-structuralism actually advocated the deconstruction of the binaries, and the hierarchy built thus on the base of the binarchies. So it wants to deconstruct. What is the deconstruction? What post-structuralism is deconstructing? The meanings and assumptions and knowledge systems which produce the illusion of singular meaning. So all meanings, all assumptions, all knowledge systems which are producing the illusion of single meaning. Post-structuralism want to deconstruct these things. So, of course, I know feminism has drawn much from the post-structuralism, and post-colonial theories have drawn much from the post-structuralism. So, because they never validated the master, they want to deconstruct the binary. In the binary of master, see, white, black, actually. So one more binary. White is the master, black is the slave. And white is good, black is the bad. So white is light, black is dark, like that. So this kind of deconstruction, of course, post-structuralism has started. And that is why actually the Eurocentrism was, began to deconstruct. And then post-structuralism believes that language has slipperiness, no fixed meaning. So this is differential, okay, difference, okay. And post-structuralism says that language has slipperiness, which makes precise interpretation impossible. Because of the slipperiness of the language, we cannot make any precise, particular what is this? Precise means very clear interpretations we can't make. So interpretations are all never ending, okay, according to post-structuralism. So for today's class, this is what I have to share. I'll be sharing what I have written down in my notes. So better you try to read, read these and then again listen to the lecture. It will help you to understand what the post-structuralism as a concept or as a theory is. Okay. Have a nice time. Bye.